Welcome to episode 71 of the Breaking Balls podcast. If you watched Saturday's races and the first half of Sunday's race had, you were probably a little worried. And then they went out and totally redeemed themselves out in Atlanta.
Amen, Bob. 1 for 6 ain't half bad. Nobody really knows what a caution is anyway. But boy, oh boy, the finish was good. We got Daniel Suarez winning it by a piece of confetti coming off of that pinata. Hit it, Dolly.
Flags in the air. Boogity, boogity, boogity. Let's go racing, boys.
Let's go racing indeed, Ad. I mean, I'm still kind of jacked up here. We're about an hour and a half outside of the Atlanta finish there on Sunday night here. And I mean, I've seen on Twitter, this is one of the greatest finishes in NASCAR history and North American motorsports. I mean, we've got a lot to break down. We can talk about Saturday's debacle later. But I want to ride the high here, Ad, because Daniel Suarez broke his little taco pinata in victory lane.
You know, Bob, it's often been said that it's not how you start, it's how you finish. And boy, oh boy, did NASCAR prove that today at Atlanta. Stage 1 was pretty boring, uneventful. Stage 2 was a little bit more of the same, but boy, oh boy, did they pull it together, because that finish was incredible. And why, you know what, Bob, let's just start right there. They take the white flag. I mean, after a long day, a war of attrition at this point in Atlanta, so many beat-up cars, and we'll talk about it. But coming around turn 4, we're 3 wide. I just want to know, what were you thinking at that point, Bob? I mean, when you see Kyle Busch kind of merge out of that second lane and take over that middle, and you see Suarez up top, what's going through your mind as a race fan?
I have 2 thoughts immediately, Ad. First of all, I'm on the backstretch watching the drag race happen. I think, oh my God, after last week, I'm just glad we're at least gotten this far. Thank you, Lord. We've made it at least 100 yards past the finish line. So that's a good start already. Like you said, in turn 3, I saw, I believe it was Bubba Wallace and was it Hendrick kind of getting loose with each other. And I thought, oh, okay. There's no help back there from the second row. This is a 3-way drag race at the line. Here we go. It looked like it was Blaney's to lose there, and then, like you said, Suarez finally got a run there. Kyle Busch had the big run in the middle, and I mean, it really is as photogenic as it gets there. I mean, I've seen the Cars meme even, but I mean, that is truly as cliche of a movie finish as you get there, but instead it's somehow what NASCAR got. That's what you should have got last week, too.
Agreed, and it's so wild, Bob, because you know, as it was developing, it looked like, you said, Bubba Wallace was kind of the first domino that fell in this whole thing. Because Bubba was running a little bit lower, but he just didn't quite have the car to make it stick, such that he couldn't push, you know, he couldn't push the inside lane, couldn't necessarily get up to push Kyle Busch in that middle lane. And there just was really no momentum except for, you know, that little push that Suarez got at the end from a pretty unsuspecting ally, Bob. Pretty interesting.
I don't know, Ad. I mean, if you watch NASCAR at this point, Austin Cindric lives to take wins away from Ryan Blaney, it feels like. This is kind of par for the course, if anything else.
Yeah, the Fords worked together so well all day. I think, you know, there was a part of stage 2 where they just had a straight monopoly on the top 5. And, you know, you would expect it to, you know, go with it to the end of the race, but nope, Austin Cindric put the accelerator on the floorboard, and, you know, ultimately gave Daniel Suarez that little push to get him over the line. Thought it was interesting, you know, talking to both Kyle Busch and Ryan Blaney after the race. Both were asked, hey, is there anything you could have done differently? And, you know, neither guy really had anything to say. They just kind of were like, you know, maybe I could have backed up off the corner, but at the end of the day, they needed the speed to get through the drag race, Bob. It just seemed like each guy did everything they could, and it was just that little bit of a push at the end there that got Daniel Suarez over the line and got us the taco pinata finish.
Great finish, by the way. Trackhouse really does kind of have a death grip on those victory lane and finish line celebrations, with Ross, you know, slamming the watermelon and Daniel smashing the taco pinata. You got to love that there. But yeah, like you said, Suarez 0.003. Is that thousandths of a second, I believe? I don't remember math.
That is
okay. 0.3 thousandths of a second over Ryan Blaney, then 7 thousandths of a second over Kyle Busch. So makes it the tightest finish between 1 and 3 in North American motorsports history. So that's already impressive of itself. Obviously, we'll talk about it later, but it gets Daniel Suarez in the playoffs, gets that monkey off his back. We talked about him coming into the season. A lot of people had him kind of as a hot seat with, the I guess jammed entryway that is Trackhouse Racing. Now everyone wants a seat over there, and to have the win early in the season, race number 2. I mean, that's huge there. But I mean, more than anything, I'm impressed, especially like I said after last week. We had a clean finish. That last lap was clean because, if anything else, this race was not clean. This was a very sloppy race. Obviously, 11 cautions, I believe, was what we had total there. But the fact that these guys were professional enough to be able to race to the line, you saw Suarez do everything those last 2 laps to do, even get a run on Blaney, and then Busch send it. Nobody spun. I thought that was a testament to how professional these guys were because the racing was high quality today.
100%. I think the first 2 stages were a lot like me at a wedding. There wasn't a ton of rhythm, and it was just wrecked way too early. But at the end of the day,
less sweat. A lot less sweat.
Oh, a lot less. Well, hold on. You never know because they're in fire suits going a couple 100 miles an hour, and I don't know. I still think I got to beat them.
I don't think it's a competition.
I don't either. I think I got them burned. Just absolutely toasted. Just Old Faithful coming out these pits at weddings, just so you know. But yeah, the whole race, I think I texted you at the beginning of stage 3 when the racing just started to get to 3 wide, or maybe even after Austin Cindric threw that absolutely insane 4 wide move. But it just got to the point to where stage 3 made me almost instantly forget about how bad the first 2 stages of this race were. And of course, we'll talk about the whole thing, but this third stage was probably the best racing we've seen. And I mean, at least this season, because we've only seen 6 stages, but the best racing we've seen, I don't know. It's been a while since I've been on the edge of my seat at a NASCAR finish quite like this.
It was nice to see. It definitely reminds me of last year's Coke 600, the Kansas race, the first year of the next. This is definitely probably a top 5 next gen car race as far as I'm concerned. Just because, like you said, you get that finish there.
But here's the thing, Bob. It's so crazy to me because without this finish and without literally that final little, final kind of 5 laps there, this is a dud. This is a complete dud of a race. But then it's just the finish. It just came through and delivered in such a way that I don't even think anybody expected, especially after watching this whole weekend of racing. I'm just feel lucky to get the finish we did.
Yeah, well, you had, like you said, it was a lot of fuel saving early. You had guys running 2 wide there. Just felt like you couldn't generate a run unless the bottom lane had a lot of momentum there. Nobody wanted to be in the bottom lane because you were risking your track position going down there. You needed a team of cars to go with you, and it was strength in numbers on the top lane all day. That being said, it was also a game of track position because, I think Fox said before the last restart, there was 7 cars not in incidents involved. I think once they actually got to the pits afterwards, 3 total cars not involved in anything today. That is just insane. So, you had your super speedway racing there, but it was all the carnage and chaos without, like you said, the flow and just the race strategy that it was kind of clunky, like you said, whether it was the big one early. What was it? How many laps was that in? Like
lap 2.
15?
That was lap 2. I think it was literally.
Lap 2. Good Lord. It's just, and it took out so many cars early that were able to bounce back, mind you. But you saw guys that had self spins like, Denny Hamlin, you had Chris Buescher, and they flew right back up to the field. So there was just no way to really have a rhythm in this race there. And then, like you said, stage 3, everything kind of came together there. But yeah, had a lot of cars taken out in carnage today, whether it was from a Joey Logano block or otherwise.
Yeah, just very much a war of attrition. A really good day if you are an investor in the company that makes the black tape that NASCAR teams use to hold the sheet metal together after they've been involved in incidents. Really good day.
Chase Elliott was a very, very big customer of that today.
I was just going to say, shareholders have to be happy after seeing all of the usage of that tape. It just seemed like it was the Frankenstein race that never stopped. Hasn't
been the first time that Hooters has been covered up with tape in Georgia. But anyway, back to you.
Yes, I'm going to try and move on from that. Pause. and continue. Bob, I just think the way that the cars had to Frankenstein their way through and just found a way to get to the finish. I mean, like you said, Chase Elliott's car at the end of this race just looked a little ridiculous. It's like kind of the fun schemes that they'll do in NASCAR Heat. I remember that there's a Tyler Reddick one that comes to mind where they've got all the damage and bodies and stuff, but
you saw Bubba Wallace's splitter, right? You saw Bubba Wallace's splitter was all jacked up and rough. It was not smooth. I mean, none of these cars looked good by the end of it. It felt like we left the duels at Daytona from like 2019.
Yeah, 100%. It literally felt like it was going to be last car that was on the track still running was going to win, and then we got this absolute gem of a finish. I mean, pressure makes diamonds, I guess. I mean, it was just, we sat there looking at a lump of coal for long enough that it became a diamond at the end there. I mean, it is mystifying to me that we are talking about this race positively, especially after stage 1 and 2. I mean, Bob, 11 cautions in this race. There was just never any time to get any sort of rhythm going.
You had a long green flag run in stage 2 where they fuel saved, like I said. But yeah, other than that, I mean, you had, when it started to get racy, you had Joey Logano throwing big blocks that, of course, where have I seen this before? Joey Logano throws a reckless block at the front of the field and wrecks out. I mean, it was just rinse and repeat. It seems like those Penske cars were dialed in again today, and yet, they wreck out when they have speed more than half the time, if not all the time, quite frankly. It's wild to see that. And obviously you had him go with Chris Buescher, who stays in the race somehow after his self-spin in the Logano, and then Denny Hamlin, who had just a long day. It seems like he had the Kyle Busch style day where, multiple incidents, then works his way back in the field, has a pit penalty, a self-spin, and then gets, front-ended by Joe Logano, still in the race somehow, leads laps after that, and then goes and wrecks out again because Chase Briscoe.
It wasn't necessarily a self-spin. I mean, we do have to be honest about that. I mean, there was a little bit of help, but at the end of the day, I think you're right. You can't blame Kyle Busch for what happened.
It was on Denny, but yes, he had help going around.
Oh, yeah, 100%. So you're right. I guess we could call that a self-spinner just to save the drama, but going to be an interesting listen for Actions Detrimental tomorrow, because it didn't seem like there was a wreck that happened today that Denny was not involved in some way, shape, or form. It was ridiculous.
And you got to think he's going to have some words for Chase Briscoe, right? Because, I mean, you even texted me. Chase Briscoe he had a fast car in that third stage, but it felt like he had like some kind of gone in 60 seconds, like payback, like where like he had to win, otherwise it was over for him, and he looked like it out there.
It almost looked like he got the order from Mr. Dennett to go out there and take Ricky Bobby out, to be honest with you. He was driving like a complete idiot. I mean, he was trying to make things stick that just were never going to. You knew from the moment that he threw himself into that corner 4 wide, there was no way that was going to happen twice in one race, especially at the New Atlanta. And ultimately he goes around. I mean, he had a solid day. He had found a way to kind of keep himself safe, and then all of a sudden decided, okay, this is my time in stage 3. I'm going to get to the front. And I just think he kind of ran out of talent a little bit. He tried to put the car in a position that he didn't necessarily have the car to make it stick. And yeah, I think he made himself more enemies and really didn't do himself anything for momentum today. It just didn't seem to be a smart move.
Not at all. And then you had, during a side-by-side where, we'll get to Fox's side-by-side coverage of it later, but you had Brad Keselowski and Kyle Larson and Corey LaJoie all go out in that wreck. I think LaJoie ended up staying in the race, but he was caught up and had damage. And then obviously Larson and Keselowski, Larson wrecking out of a plate race or drafting race. What's new, bud?
Yeah, 5 for 5 for Larson wrecking out at Atlanta. But from now on, Brad Keselowski will be referred to on this podcast as Biggie Bag Brad, because, to get the caution in the side-by-side right when I was hearing about Jamie and the Bag Boys from Wendy's, I mean, it was just vintage. You very rarely get to realize you're living through a meme, but that one was pretty special there, Bob.
That's the meme off the track, and then the meme on the track is Brad Keselowski, like Joey Logano, wrecking out of the plate race with a fast car, and then Kyle Larson, who you could honestly make a case had a top 3 car today, always surging through the field, whether it was from loose lug nut penalties and all this, that, and the other. He was able to surge through, and then wouldn't you know it, just gets caught up and no fault of his own again in a wreck. I mean, the man just can't catch a break.
Nope, absolutely not. Speaking of not being able to catch a break, a guy who just hasn't really been able to get momentum going from last year and even into this year. We talked about him earlier with the Frankenstein car, but Chase Elliott, another little brush up with Ross Chastain. Um, I don't know, Bob. What do you make of that? Obviously, they come together. I'm hesitant to blame Ross, but at the end of the day, he was the only guy at that part of the race who was driving aggressively. What do you make of it?
I think it's easy to say it just because it's Ross with the track record. I think more than anything, Chase Elliott just wasn't in there today again. He had the wreck out early where he had the tape all over the front left of that car, and then you look up and he's running third at some point with that Frankenstein car, and then has the spin and just never got the momentum back there. I'm not worried yet, just because he did win a stage at Daytona, so he's got that in his hand already. But add the longer this streak goes, every week where he's not performing and getting these results, you gotta think that is weighing on him and that whole team there. And it's an elephant in the room there between him and Alex Bowman. While their team absolutely flies through the competition every week, they're left in the dust half the time. And it's very interesting to me because it's not like Chase Elliott is a scrub driver. He's a NASCAR champion, but the results are there for a reason.
And it's really wild, and I think you brought up a good point, because it almost seems like Hendrick Motorsports is split into two right now, because you've got Byron and Larson, who are very clearly performing, making the best out of the equipment, and then somewhere in there you have Elliott and Bowman, who just haven't really been able to get it going. And, you're getting the same support, you're getting the same information. It just, you kind of scratch your head and wonder, what is the difference here?
And I'm glad you said that, because it's interesting. Hendrick always feels like, and even the year right before the next gen car, was it 2021, I want to say, you had Kyle Larson in his first year at Hendrick dominating, and then you had Chase Elliott, who won 5-6 races there, and William Byron and Alex Bowman were the guys that were looking around going, why are we not getting the results here? And it looks like almost that Byron and Elliott have kind of flip-flopped there. Bowman's still looking for his rhythm back after his back injury and then just subsequent fall apart last year. But yeah, it looks like Elliott and Byron have completely flip-flopped personalities and positions on the track. And maybe it's just that's how the pecking order is at Hendrick. There's only 2 cars at a time that can be good. I don't know, but that's very interesting now that you say that. I'm kind of putting 2 and 2 together here.
Yeah, and it just seems like, add that to the comments that were made last week about how, not last week, but I think it was 2 weeks ago when Jeff Gordon was on Dale Jr.'s podcast, and he was talking about how Hendrick Motorsports does operate on a loss. So it gets to a point to where if you're going to spend your money and you're going to lose money, you're going to want to invest in kind of the sure thing. And it certainly seems like Mr. H's 2 sure things are Kyle Larson and William Byron right now. And it'll be interesting to see if Chase Elliott and Alex Bowman can do something to turn it around. But definitely something to keep an eye on.
And I'm glad you mentioned the turnaround there, because that's a great segue ad. Once again, I have to tip the cap to you. You were right here, because your takes the last, year and a half on FRM, Front Row Motorsports, getting better, looks better and better every single week. Obviously, the talk coming out of Daytona was that they're a tier 1 OEM team with Ford now. So they're getting a lot of funding and help there with, their speed. And it shows the first 2 weeks ad. Todd Gilliland, a man who was literally had to find 4 or 5 races last year to get a full-time ride because they had the part-time Chandler Smith in that car. And we're like, oh, we're not sure about Todd. Goes out and takes the FRM record for laps led in a NASCAR race. Over 50 laps. Michael McDowell was on pole, first time in his career. And there's not much else to say, but FRM's potentially a threat to win the championship this year, or at least maybe a Final 8 run. I don't know, but you're right.
Yeah. It's interesting to kind of see it come to fruition. Michael McDowell finishes in the top 10 today. After kind of a scrappy performance, we'll talk about a little bit of why he had to be so scrappy in a minute here. But, I think Todd Gilliland having the run that he did and leading as many laps as he did, talk about someone who deserved much better than I think he ended up 25th. Is that correct?
Yeah, I want to say it was 25th.
Yeah.
McDowell,
anyway, 25th until you tell me differently. But he deserved better. He ran a strong race the entire time. Looked comfortable racing with some of the household names of the sport.
He finished 8th, by the way. You're thinking of Todd Gilliland, who was 26th, but I
No,
mean,
I know. That's what I said. I said McDowell
oh,
finished in the
okay,
top 10, and then Gilliland finished 20. You said 26th?
gotcha. Yeah, 26th.
Or,
Yep.
yeah. But no, dude, just a good day all around. It just shows that, apparently you heard a little bit of a mention today in the broadcast about how apparently there's an alliance with Team Penske, which, makes sense with that coming from the
Where did
OEM
that come
support.
from? Has that been common knowledge and I just didn't know that, or?
I don't know. I guess honestly, I think it makes sense. The more you think about it, the more it does make sense, because we did understand they were going to be getting a little bit more factory help. Obviously, Penske could be kind of considered an extension of Ford as an OEM. It's just the two are ingrained to this point to where it's like, look, that they just may have access to that data. And yeah, both guys are taking advantage of it. I think, Michael McDowell had that little slip with the pit road, which we'll get into. But yeah, just a heck of a day for them. Looks like they're kind of setting themselves up for a year of success. I mean, they had speed today, and it was undeniable.
I mean, the fact that Todd Gilliland goes out there and was able to make moves, and it wasn't like, when he got passed, he slid back into the field. He consistently was pushing back up the field. When he restarted 10th, was up there fighting for the lead again there, Ad. And, he has that late race pit where, I guess they had to change tires with about 10 to go that ruined his race there. And like you said, finished 26th. But the fact that he can go out there and show speed, especially, like I said, after being basically a castaway last year, and, it's impressive to see that. But, like you said, moving forward for FRM, you've got to think that the goal was now to get both cars in the playoffs. And not only that, they could win multiple races if their speed is actually as legit as it looks.
I was going to say, I don't think they may be able to get both of their teams in, and I don't think it'll be on points. I think there's a chance both of them win a race this year. I mean, at this point, especially early, I mean, we're forgetting that Michael McDowell's a pretty, decent road course racer. He's at least shown with this next-gen car that he's got a little bit of ability there, and who knows, with some of the data, he may be a real contender, coming into a lot of the road courses that they're running. But yeah, there just seems to be something brewing there. I didn't know what it was. I've never really been able to put my finger on it, but just excited to see them have success. The rising tide that lifts all ships. And yeah, definitely good for Ford and that new body and the new body style to have some more guys being successful, especially early on this year.
And Stuart Haas is sitting there going, man, like that, come on. What are they doing that we're not?
Yeah, I mean, maybe Tony Stewart needs to come off the drag strip and spend a little bit of time with the gentleman at Ford to get a little bit of that insider info. I don't know. Who knows?
I really don't know, Ad. But yeah, you touched on it. We might as well talk about it because, Michael McDowell had a lot of speed. It felt like Todd Gilliland had more of a race pace today, but Michael McDowell was in the top 10 most of the day up until stage 2, about halfway through. 11 cautions today, Ad. And Fox showed, their, race summary and most of the cautions, the self spins. And then they show this Michael McDowell, William Byron spin where both guys lock up, and both guys hit the wall head on, by the way, on the backstretch on the inside wall. Not, super fast, but around 60 miles an hour. Come to a complete stop on the racetrack on the apron. But that wasn't a caution, huh?
Yeah, I think I mentioned it in the intro. Does anybody really know what a caution is in NASCAR anymore? I mean, at this point, they've made so many judgment calls, and they've let the race dictate whether or not they're going to throw a caution so many times, Bob. It just feels like there's no consistency in any of the rulings. This one, I mean, I guess I talked about it with you a little bit before. Maybe because they were down on the apron. That excuses it a little bit. Maybe that's the logic, but at this point, if you held a gun to my head and showed me a clip and asked me if NASCAR was going to throw a caution, you may as well shoot me. I'd have no idea what to do.
We have our own version of the NFL's "Is that a catch or not?" I guess, so that's fun. We have our own mainstream meme. That's cool. What is a caution? What isn't? But yeah, I kept going over and over out loud. How is that not a caution? What is going on here? Like you said, you just want consistency, I guess, more than anything.
And especially because it's not like it's a traditional pit road to where you start and you're kind of by where the infield is, anything like that. You're halfway around the track and you're in the middle of a straightaway right where they are. It just didn't seem like the most prudent thing to do. I understand you're in the middle of a pit cycle. You don't want to mess with guys and throw the caution there. You're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. But at the end of the day, it's a safety thing. And nobody can fault you if you consistently choose to be safe. I think where you run into problems is when you kind of play this half in, half out game. And then it's like, okay, well, is it the drivers involved? Is it the situation? What are you using to decide it? It's got to be an objective criteria. This is just another one of those events in a long list for NASCAR to where it's like, wake up, do something, be consistent with your officiating. But I'm not going to waste any more breath on it, Bob.
Well, I will just waste a few more because that's just my nature, Ad. And it's a good segue into just the overall, racing at Atlanta, just because, you have a 10-minute practice session even on Saturday before or after qualifying. So first of all, NASCAR's gotten away from practice, which is just ridiculous. But then they make you qualify with a cold car. And then afterwards, like, okay, here's 10 minutes of practice where you have to learn the pit road sequence, which is different from any other track because of Atlanta's narrowness and the safety feature there where you've got to start on the back apron on the back stretch, go all the way through turn 3 and 4 at 90 miles an hour. And then once you get to the pit road, you hit 45. Why make it so convoluted? Why make it so confusing, Ad? I don't understand it. And it, like you said, then you have confusion for things like McDowell and Byron where they get into a wreck on it and they go, oh, well, we don't want to mess with it because the long pit road messes with the pit cycle and it's going to wreck the race for half the field. Well, that's y'all's fault. We can't do the hypothetical, oh, well, this and that. That's how you mess with the integrity there and what is a caution, what isn't, Ad. But is there any way to fix this pit road, or are we just stuck with this kind of weird-ass zombie double mile-per-hour pit road that is just... It's hard to explain than the NASCAR point system somehow.
Yeah, I just don't get it. I mean, it doesn't really necessarily make any sense for, whether it be for racing, safety. It doesn't accomplish any single goal. It just kind of makes this very weird long pit road that is there for some reason and is different from something that they do every single other week. It just doesn't necessarily seem like it's got much of a place in the sport. I don't know. I just think why there's no need. I guess, you don't want guys dive bombing out of the draft, but I don't know, man. It just seems like they're going to have to get out of the draft eventually, even if it's before, to get at the line where you're only allowed to go 90 as opposed to 45. So it's like you're kind of delaying the inevitable. Just have these guys do what they've done every week. It'll probably be safer, in my opinion.
Yeah, because like you saw with McDowell and Byron, they had a calamity getting the pit road. I just don't know what to make of Atlanta because you've got such a tight, narrow super speedway style racing on a mile and a half that it almost doesn't work because of things like the pit road. But then you have the racing there where it does work for the Cup Series. It doesn't really work for everyone else, and we'll get to that. But, whether it's the pit road awkwardness, the sunset driving where you've got the sun literally fading in your eyes at, 180, 90 miles an hour. I mean, it's just a weird track. And it's produced some good racing the last 2 years for the Cup, but there's just a lot of weird caveats with it.
Yeah, kind of weird that the NASCARs don't, or the stock cars that they're racing in NASCAR don't have sunshade visors. I don't know. I guess for some reason they just decided to uninstall them. Real bummer. I get frustrated when there's sun in my eyes and I'm going like 60, generously 40 on a California freeway in rush hour. And that's generous. I'm probably doing like 15 if we're going to be honest. But the sun in your eyes, even at that slow, is a pain in the ass. At 180 miles an hour, 170 miles an hour, it's a safety hazard and probably grounds to move the race at night. And ultimately, this race kind of sets up to be a night race because there's a little more grip in the track when it's cold and these guys were able to start making moves. And I think that's probably why we got the stage 3 that we did was the track was cooling down. The sun was going down a little bit more, a little bit more grip in the track. But yeah, it just, I don't exactly know what you do to fix Atlanta other than the obvious, even though we saw some self-spins today, I think a little more horsepower at least allows guys to get runs on their own and be a little bit more creative. But I don't know, Bob. I think it's got to be at night and they need a little more horsepower, but those are just my 2 ideas to fix it. But who knows?
It would look good under the lights, and also, with Atlanta, whether it's the night race in the fall or I guess the playoff opener now in the fall or, the second race of the year, it just looks better at night, but also the humidity in Georgia, even, now you never know what you're going to get weather-wise. And obviously you're playing the risk with rain being, in the South. It could rain anytime, but I do agree with you. It does shape up to be a better race under the lights in Atlanta generally. I can't imagine driving with that sun blaring in your face as you're letting off the gas heading into turn one at 180, 190 there. It's a wild dynamic to me.
I mean, you heard Kevin Harvick talk about it on the broadcast. He goes, nobody can see. He straight up said, he goes, look, at this point at the race, with the sun in your eyes going that fast, you're guessing. You're going in. It's basically a test of your will at that point, because you have to trust yourself even though you can't see, and not lift, and trust you're going to make the corner, which I think is just a wild thing to ask people to do.
It's very, very just surreal for someone like me, but for those guys, it's just another week of the Cup Series I had. But yeah, just to kind of put a bow on just the Cup race on Sunday there. Look at the results here. Obviously, the Penske guys definitely had the speed there with two of the top four. Bubba Wallace ended up saving the day. He was in that early lap 2 wreck, and then even went down a lap early in the race. Ended up battling back to a 5th place finish, and then the one thing that jumps out to me is you've got a lot of the typical plate racers in the top 10. Ricky Stenhouse, Bubba Wallace, obviously Hendrick, Michael McDowell, Chris Buescher. Those are the kind of guys that you do expect to see. Ryan Blaney every week when it's at those drafting style tracks. Those seem to be the guys that are typically threats, whether it's him, Denny Hamlin, Brad Keselowski. But Brad and Joey are the guys that wreck out. You know that Chris Buescher, Ricky Stenhouse, who I can't believe I'm saying this, doesn't wreck out of these races anymore. It just seems like the usual suspects now.
Oddly enough, who'd have thought Recchi is not going to wreck anymore? But whatever. I guess a tiger can change its stripes at the end of the day. But yeah, I don't know, man. It's like I said. I kind of am. I play this one with both sides of the fence because I'm so excited for the finish that we got. But it's hard not to think about what this race would be like if we didn't have that last little bit of the finish. Really, it was it was an interesting race. I think, Todd Gilliland having success all day, the Fords having success all day. I don't know, man. It's a very, it's kind of a surreal feeling because I was ready to talk about this race in one light, and then the finish just fixed everything for us. And I hate that it worked this well. I really do.
I do have to give a couple shout outs here, just kind of deeper in the cut here. Kaz Grall in the 15 for Rick Ware, coming out in 14th. He got caught up in a couple of things today. Justin Haley finishing 20th. Yeah, it just seems like Rick Ware, maybe they are invested a little bit more there. It just, hopefully the results are paying off just for their sake there. Another couple of guys there. Corey LaJoie ended up, like I said, he was caught up in that Kyle Larson, Brad Keselowski wreck 13th. And then one of the ones that I do want to give a shout out to, the first man out of the race, Josh Williams in that Colleague 16 car. I have no beef with Josh Williams. I actually think he's a great guy. I love that he's getting the opportunity, but that is karma for taking AJ Allmendinger out of that car. And I will not rest until this is justified. AJ Allmendinger should be in that 16 car full time. They are wasting a charter. And again, not that it's Josh Williams' fault. He got caught up in it, but AJ Allmendinger should be in that car full time. So, Colleague finishing last in the 16 charter. Sorry, not sorry.
Yeah. Bubba Wallace actually is another guy who came out, with a good top 5 finish today, kind of pulled that from the jaws of defeat. Really kind of a rough day running around. Kind of felt like his boss a little bit, kind of involved in a lot of different things. But at the end of the day, found a way to pull it together. Another guy who, we've been kind of critical of on this show, and I think we're both not going to enjoy giving him his flowers, but he did have a pretty solid day. That's Austin Cindric. We talked about it. Obviously the finish was what it was, but ultimately he was able to put some things together. Really just shows that he's on the right track, especially after kind of the sophomore slump last year. Just seems like he's going to kind of be able to come back, hopefully, put things together for them, because Lord knows he could use a good year, to say the least.
He could use a good year, obviously, with his teammates winning the championship the last 2 years. Obviously, you've got Daniel Suarez and William Byron now locking themselves in the playoffs with the last 2 wins at Atlanta and Daytona. So there are your first 2 playoff spots open. On the Penske side, though, just to kind of loop back, Joey Logano, the first champion of this next-gen car back in 2022. He's a 2-time champion for the Penske 22 team. We didn't have this on the show rundown, but it popped into my head, and I just got to bring it back because this popped out right before the race a couple hours before, that he got sent to the back of the field, and it ultimately saved him with that lap 2 wreck because he had a pass-through penalty for what I'm calling Glovegate. And it's for an unapproved equipment during qualifying, and there's an in-car camera. It's clear as day. He is not running his normal red gloves. He has got some kind of manufactured racing glove, almost looking like an oven mitt with webbing between his finger and thumb to catch the speed and drag and reduce the aero and drag on the car. Dad, I just got to ask you a question. What the hell?
In all my time, in all of my life of dealing with gloves, whether that be, oven mitts to keep my hands safe when I'm taking things out of the oven, or football gloves, boxing gloves, all sorts of different gloves I've worn in my life. The spider webbed gloves to reduce drag were certainly not anything that I had on my radar. What the advantage is to those, other than maybe Joey has stock in the company and is trying to, kind of make a controversial splash, a vintage PR move here. But I don't know, man. It's one of those things that you just kind of scratch your head because you don't understand necessarily why he's doing it. He's been racing for so long. There's no way those are the gloves he's comfortable in. So why do it? It just didn't make any sense.
You do it for a competitive advantage. You're thinking you're going to get one over the field, but with today's day and age, you've got an in-car camera that's showing that. You've got eyes on you. I don't understand how this got through unless this was just some kind of simple mistake, but it would have been obvious to anyone when they were getting into that car. I don't understand their ad. I thought I've seen it all here when it comes to competitive advantages, but the gloves now, the driver's racing gloves are now the next thing we're trying to get over on this next gen car. If it's not the car itself to get over the field, it's what I'm wearing.
I was going to say, this kind of feels like a lot of the Deflategate talks, to where it's like, how big of an advantage will this actually give you? Like, what is this? What does this actually do for you? But I guess, it's one of those things. The margin is so small with these next-gen cars that even the possibility of your gloves giving you an advantage is something that you just got to throw and see what happens. So, Joey Logano, thank you for Glovegate. I don't know, man. That's an interesting one.
And I love that the pass-through penalty that was supposedly served didn't even matter because he was literally on pit road as the caution threw out for lap 2 on that big wreck. So it wasn't like I am curious to see what NASCAR rules, if there's any penalties or fines, this week. I'm sure we'll find out on Tuesday or Wednesday. I would imagine there's some kind of, just because they don't want to open up a slippery slope here. They're going to have to, I think, make sure that they know that this is not okay and to set the precedence ad. But do want to give a shout out on Twitter. It's his name is at Tom Engel's Desk. I don't know him or what he does. I don't know if that's a good account or not, but I did see him come across my timeline because he had the Joe Logano face over Orenthal James Simpson in the courtroom wearing latex gloves. And I got to tell you, that's the best thing I've seen on social media in a long, long time. I didn't think I'd ever see Joe Logano on OJ Simpson's glove don't fit, you must have quit meme. But here we are, 2024, the year of our Lord, and I'm so here for that. Best meme I've seen in a long time, sir.
Yeah, you got to tip your cap sometimes. I mean, if the glove don't fit, you must quit. Joey Logano, however, is guilty, so there's no chance that we're going to get a book out of Joey titled "If I Would Have Done It," because he was caught red-handed, quite literally. So, I guess, we can move on. We always kind of talk about the broadcast, different things that we kind of noticed, I think, we talked about it a little bit before the show, but tonight was the night where it is evidently clear to me that whoever is in charge of producing or deciding what is on the screen, on camera during a Fox broadcast must be very good at broadcast television, but they do not have a lot of race IQ, because we were seeing a lot of action that didn't necessarily matter when there was some pretty important things going on.
Well, and Dale Jr. even called it out on Twitter, and I'm glad that he did, just because it does get more of an eyeball there, and I'm sure Fox sees that kind of stuff when someone like him speaks, is that there were such tight angle shots, whether it was from bumpers or onboards or just, looking at, one battle, when the whole field from 1 to 20 was stacked up within a second and a half, 2 seconds of each other, 2-3 wide for a lot of that part in stage 3, especially. But, we were focused on 1 and 2 battles at a time and then quick cut into the other. Zoom out. Give me that helicopter shot. I love seeing the shot of the cars being able to make that run. on one another, and seeing physically how fast they are coming up on each other. And that's when you see, aggressive blocks like Joey Logano and how aggressive and how dangerous they could be, because they're laying it out on the line because of that track position.
I mean, at the end of the day, the onboard camera is best used as a side dish. It can't be your main way of broadcasting because you lose too much of the race if you're physically attached to one car. There's a reason that we don't, that people don't watch the race through the eyes of their favorite driver. If it were possible or feasible to get a feeling of the race by doing that, I'm sure there's people that would. The reason you watch the Fox broadcast is to kind of get that big picture feel of the race, see what's going on with the entirety of the track. Where are the runs developing? Is my favorite driver going to have to pit now? Is he going to get left out to dry when he's coming off of pit road with no, where's the pack at? There's all sorts of different things that you want to be able to keep track of that right now the broadcast just isn't allowing for it because they're not kind of taking that zoomed out view ever. It's just a little too zoomed in, which I appreciate because you do get a feel for the speed, which is very cool, but I think you're sacrificing a lot of the feel of the overall race.
You get a feel for the overall race just by being able to see the whole encompassing field, not just the leaders, not just, the big battles. You get a sense of the whole race when you can see the pack there. And I just think sometimes less is more with that.
And this is one of the things, it's one of the onboard shots that bothered me the most this week. I mean, you're running 15 laps left to go in a pretty boring Xfinity race. And for some odd reason, they decided to cut to an onboard camera of Haley Deegan, who's running 25th. I mean, it just, there's no rhyme or reason to that. Well, it does nothing to develop the broadcast. I mean, what are we doing?
Well, we'll get to that here in a second, but there was just nothing to cut to with that Xfinity race. They were grasping for straws. But just to put a bow on the Fox coverage before we do get to that slanderous Saturday in Atlanta, I will say Kevin Harvick is just, and we said it last week with his debut at the Daytona 500. Great addition to the booth. His knowledge and expertise and his experience being in that car, obviously in November helps, but he just has so much experience in the motorsports community. I think in the NASCAR, he's seen it all. I mean, you saw that package at the beginning of the race where he was meeting all the people that were at his first win in 2001 in Atlanta and surprising them in the back of that photo. Just, he's got so much knowledge of the NASCAR community that I think he's going to hopefully mellow out Clint Bowyer a little bit. I know that Mike Joy and Clint Bowyer have done a couple of verbal barbs I've noticed through the last couple of weeks. I don't know if they're just playing with each other or what, but man, Harvick is such a great addition. If we could just take Clint Bowyer out and throw Larry Mack in, maybe we would have the perfect booth. Because even Mike Joy it seems like has a little bit more energy in the booth this year.
Well, it just seems like he finally has a color guy who is adding to the broadcast. I think, Clint is neutral. I mean, there's some times where Clint is really good. There's other times where Clint's really bad. But I think he's kind of a net neutral. I think what Harvick brings is just a sense of positivity, and it really adds a perspective that no one else but Kevin Harvick can give. And like you said, he's just so well respected in the motorsport community as a whole, and because of just his personality. And I think as he's began to kind of open up, fans have really started to love a guy that they already liked. I mean, let's face facts. Kevin Harvick was already, especially towards the end of his career, kind of took that elder statesman role and was really kind of beloved by, no matter who you rooted for. I think there's a lot of guys who really enjoyed, love Kevin Harvick, especially towards the end. And just to get the insight that he brings, I think it really does elevate the broadcast as a whole. It's just a matter of getting on the same page with the guys in the production truck because they're doing such a good job of actually, talking about the things that are on the TV. It's just now we got to figure out how to focus better on, getting the right action on at the right times.
And like you said, on Saturday, there needs to be action on the track in order to be able to work on that. Dude. Because I said that there was a tough Saturday. That's being generous with the Xfinity and Truck Series. They branded Saturday as all three were going to be on track. If you were in town, you got a great ticket. You got to see Cup qualifying. You got to see the Xfinity and Truck Series race and add. You got to see Kyle Busch win the Truck Series race where nobody could generate runs. I mean, it was pretty tough. I mean, every now and then you got the bottom lane to surge one or two, but then if you couldn't get in line, you'd fall right back. And then that's pretty much the truck race. If I missed anything, please stop me. But I mean, other than that, yep. Okay, perfect. Xfinity, and we don't have to spend a ton of time. We can spend an hour on it, but it was tough to watch. And then you got to the end and it was just a calamity with the fuel status. I don't even know what to call it because it was I don't know, Ad.
How do you spend an entire race saving fuel and then everybody still ends up running out of gas at the end of the race? I mean, it was just one of those things. Everything that could go wrong as far as making this race watchable for a fan did. Right down to the late caution that forced overtime, and everybody was already in fuel trouble, and all sorts of gambles. Nobody happier to see everybody else's calamity than Austin Hill, who ultimately ended up winning the race after the seas parted in front of him. But yeah, Bob, that one was pretty tough to watch. It tested my fandom early. I thought I was going to have to schedule a root canal or something to find something to look forward to by the end of that race.
You had like 2 laps to go, 3 to go, and every single Ford ran out of fuel on the track. Impressive enough. And then you get everyone going, should we pit, should we not? And like 7-8 cars stay out saying, we're going to risk it, we're going to be fine. And then as we're going with 1 to go to restart, you see them start to drop off one by one like flies. And then as we're taking the green, there's 4 cars left, I think, that hadn't stayed out. 2 drop out immediately and set a pick on the field, and then 1 drops out and goes up and gives Austin Hill behind him a parting C for the win. I mean, it was just, I don't know. I wasted a few hours of my life on that ad, and I came away just going, God, I hope Sunday delivers. And fortunately, it did after about 120, 130 laps.
Yeah, I mean, it was a test in patience, but at the end of the day, like I said, we got our first very, very good, even great stage of the year with stage 3. Now, we hope to keep the momentum going. Let's see what we can do next week. Are we in Vegas next week? Is anybody?
I was gonna say we are in Vegas next week, and knock on wood, today was our first Sunday race of the year. I would like to think it's not going to rain in Las Vegas, but God only knows it's probably going to rain a foot and probably snow, and we'll get some kind of dust storm that we can't see the track. But
yeah, it'll be a Darude sandstorm in the desert. Nobody will see anything. It'll be pretty ridiculous. But Bob, any finishing touches, any final thoughts to put on the boat, the gift that is this podcast we're going to give to our people?
Honestly, Ad, I just want to go back to the finish real quick. We watch NASCAR every week. We go in and out. We watch hours and hours of content. And these are the moments that we wait for.
Yep.
Like you said, it was a long payoff. The first part of the race was not great. You had the calamity and the wrecks and no chemistry. You're like, oh, man, here we go. Typical NASCAR, just wrecking and bumping and doing all this sort of nonsense. And then it delivers. And we're going to have a memorable moment that you're going to go back and see, just like that Kevin Harvick, Jeff Gordon finish from 2001 where they kept showing it. You're going to see the Daniel Suarez, Ryan Blaney, Kyle Busch, three-headed monster. They've even put it like the Cars meme where, Lightning McQueen is sticking out his tongue. I mean, this is such a great moment for NASCAR coming off of Netflix to have a viral finish like that. And I'm really hoping next week at Vegas, not asking for the same kind of craziness, but all I'm asking for is just some competitiveness and just a little bit of something we can build off here. Maybe even a Sunday race. God only knows.
Maybe we'll go racing on Sunday. Hopefully we can keep the good vibes and the good racing going. Bob, speaking of good vibes, why don't we just keep it going for us now? Like, comment, subscribe, please. I mean, it helps us immensely. We're trying to build our base here, trying to have a good season. We've been consistently finishing in the, outside of the top 30. We would love to kind of get in the top 30 this year, really make some strides, move forward as a program, get some good data. We're working here at Breaking Balls. We promise.
We are NASCAR's Rick Ware as far as podcasting. We might be at the back right now, but we are hopefully building a future between Cosgralla, Justin Haley. I don't know which one of us is which. You can make that determination if you want as a fan. But like Ad said, if you've made it this far, God bless you first of all. But just share it, subscribe, be a friend, tell a friend, and Ad. For once, I'm going to give you the last word on this podcast.
Okay. I hadn't seen a car go down the track quite like Austin Dillon did. I haven't seen it. So let me restart there. It says the joke was building. I have not seen a car slide down anything that fast than when we saw a beautiful woman sliding down the pole at the Magic City before the race.